It's 2024 and you're looking to buy a Corvette, but money doesn't grow on trees, at least not on my trees anyway. So more specifically, you want to buy the best Corvette performance bang for the buck available today. Well, you've come to the right place. I've been in the Corvette game now for over a decade, so let's take a little walk together. We'll go through a whole bunch of facts. I'll toss in a few opinions here and there, all in order to make sure that you're able to buy the most Corvette performance possible for your hard-earned money. Next.
Toys for life.
The purpose of this video is to zero in on which Corvette generation offers the most performance for the least amount of money. We're really not going to focus much on which generation looks the best. I'm not going to try to objectively figure out which generation performs the best. Our main focus is performance for the dollar. Speaking of performance, I'm going to start right out with a big fat opinion, and that is the C8 Corvette is the best performing Corvette ever made, period. That having been said, I'm going to have to eliminate the C8 from this contest right out of the gate, not because the numerator is not big enough, because it is, but the denominator is just too big. Make no mistake, with the C8 you get a crazy amount of handling, acceleration, and technology, and when I did my market analysis just a few days ago, I was surprised at how low the prices are now compared to just 1 year ago. You don't have to look very hard to find a low mileage C8 Corvette in 2024 for about $65,000. That, folks, is absolutely a serious amount of sports car for the money, but I do think we can find a better performance value if we keep searching. Let's move on down to the other end of the generation spectrum, and we're going to get rid of 3 generations with one swing of the axe. The C1 and the C2, many would argue, are the best looking Corvettes ever made, and who am I to argue, but unfortunately their technology is just so old, and by that I mean their handling is questionable at best. So I'm going to have to eliminate both of those generations, and while we're at it, the C3 Corvette is pretty much in that same league from a technology, handling, and acceleration standpoint, so I'm going to have to give it the boot from this contest as well. So we're just 2 minutes into the video and we're already down to 4 remaining generations, and I've got one more generation that we can take out pretty quickly, so let's do it. High performance requires plenty of power and excellent handling. Great handling requires a strong, rigid chassis that enables all of the various suspension components to work together to hold the road. And while the next generation to be yanked from our list does have fairly decent power, especially in its later years, its chassis rigidity just simply doesn't compare with the other 3 remaining generations. And so due to its marginal chassis rigidity with its removable roof in place and its waffle-like structure with that removable roof taken out, it's time for the C4 Corvette to exit our quest for the best performance value. Now I know I'll probably get some grief for that down in the comments, but even if there wasn't a chassis rigidity concern with the C4 Corvette, performance enthusiasts are going to want to modify their performance car with various engine modifications down the road. For most of us, that's just part of the experience. That having been said, aftermarket tuning support for the C4 Corvettes in terms of tuning hardware, software, and even finding an experienced tuner for this platform are slim to nil. So that's just another nail in the coffin to removing the C4 from our list. Moving on, the C5, 6, and 7 are all very refined sports cars, each offering high levels of horsepower, handling, and reliability, and each offers a modest improvement over the last generation. Now, admittedly, that last statement was pretty general, so let's go ahead and buzz through some of the most important objective performance characteristic numbers of each generation so that you can get a clear idea as to how much additional performance each one brings to the table. The characteristics that we're going to be looking at and comparing are as follows: curb weight, horsepower, power to weight ratio, 0 to 60 time, quarter mile time, braking capabilities, slalom, and finally, lateral G capability. First up, let's look at the curb weights of each generation, and generally speaking, curb weights are important because the more the car weighs, the harder the brakes, the engine, and the suspension have to work to get the car to do what you're asking it to do. And not coincidentally, that's why you see through the last few generations, the Corvette has evolved from an all-steel structure and suspension to more and more aluminum parts, to all aluminum parts, and even a few carbon fiber parts sprinkled in. Next up, we'll look at the horsepower numbers for the more common models within each generation. Keep in mind these are peak horsepower numbers. I've gathered them from what I deem to be reliable sources, and also keep in mind that as the engines have gotten newer and more sophisticated, the overall horsepower averages have gone up as well. So here are the horsepower numbers for the C5, 6, and 7, starting out with the C5's LS1, which has 350 at 5,600 RPMs, and the LS6 with a little bit different camshaft and better flowing heads has 405 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs. The C6 LS2 engine has 400 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs, and the LS3 with its better heads and a little bit more displacement has 430 horsepower at 6,500 RPMs. And finally, the C7 with its LT1's advanced variable valve timing and direct injection has 460 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs. Now let's take a look at the various power to weight ratios. Horsepower numbers are nice, but they don't tell the whole story. It's the power to weight ratio that gives you an idea of how many pounds are strapped to each horsepower. Kind of like how big the trailer is that's attached to a car. And for power to weight ratio, of course we want this number to be as low as possible. The C5 came with two engine offerings. The LS1 comes in at 9.3 pounds per horsepower, while the LS6 comes in at 7.7 pounds per horsepower. C6s with the LS2 come in at 8.1 pounds per horsepower, and the LS3 equipped C6s come in at 7.5 pounds per horsepower. And finally, the C7 with its most common LT1 engine leads the pack with a low 7.2 pounds per horsepower. 0 to 60 mile an hour time is obviously a function of power to weight ratio, but it's also a big function of how much traction the vehicle is able to get. And to a lesser degree, it's also a function as to how well the gearing and the drivetrain are optimized. And with that in mind, the C5 hits 60 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds, while the Z06 C5 hits it in 4.1 seconds. Moving on to the C6, the LS2 and LS3 versions hit 60 miles an hour in 4.1 and 4 seconds, respectively. And finally, the C7 LT1 hits 60 miles an hour in a blistering 3.8 seconds.
Dude, it's so freaking fast. Like, my brain still feels scrambled.
Quarter mile times are yet another important yardstick to measure the performance of these generations. The actual elapsed time is definitely affected by the ability of the car to get traction and to hook up. The mile per hour is more of a function of the power to weight ratio and how well the gears and the drivetrain are optimized. And as far as bragging rights go, quarter mile times and mile per hour are probably only second to how much horsepower does it make. The C5 Coupe knocks down the quarter mile in 13.3 seconds at 107. The Z06 C5 is a fair bit quicker at 12.5 at 115. The C6 with the LS2 does it in 12.7 at 111, while the LS3 bests that time by 0.3 seconds and 4 miles per hour. And finally, the C7 LT1 takes the top spot one more time at 12.2 at 118 miles per hour.
Damn, these things are fast.
Braking is incredibly important for obvious reasons, and the C5 can stop from 60 miles an hour in 115 feet. The C6 generally does it in 110 feet, and once again, the C7 takes the top spot at about 99 feet from 60 to 0. In the slalom, the C6 achieves a minor victory, coming in at 67.9 miles per hour, versus a slightly slower 66.5 miles per hour for the C5. The C7 comes in with a solid victory at 72.8 miles per hour versus 67.9 miles per hour in the C6.
A G-meter? Now why would an American car need a G-meter?
With the C7 coming in first in the slalom test, it's no surprise that it also has the highest lateral G, coming in at 1.08, versus the C6 at 0.95 and the C5 at 0.93. You now have most, if not all, of the key performance data you need to compare the capabilities of these three generations. And in my opinion, unless you happen to be a seasoned long course road racer, all three of these cars handle better than the vast majority of drivers can drive them, and that certainly includes me. Also, the power to weight ratios of these 3 generations are so close. I think if you put me in the passenger side of each of these cars, blindfolded, and then had an experienced driver take me down the quarter mile, one car right after the other. The only one I think I might be able to pick out would be the C5 with the LS1. The other cars are just so close that I don't think I could repeatedly and accurately pick out which one is which. Now let's dig into the price side of the equation, because it's absolutely a key ingredient in the equation that we need to be able to populate to figure out which Corvette offers the best value for your performance dollar. To do that, I typically use a proprietary blend of data using Kelley Blue Book information for each model, and then I also do a quick and dirty market analysis using comparables for each generation. Here are the Kelley Blue Book values I pulled for each model. All cars were assumed to be in very good condition, located in Minnesota, and to have 75,000 miles on the clock. Now I have to admit the price for the C6 LS3 looks a little low to me, and so does the price for the 2015 C7. Luckily, part 2 of this analysis is to use live market data with cars that are currently for sale, taking 5% off of their asking price, as most prices have a little wiggle room. And here's the final price that I've come up with for each model based on input from Kelley Blue Book, and more importantly, local current market data. And here's my assessment as to how each model finished based upon all of the key performance metrics that we reviewed. And finally, here are the top 5 Toys for Life Best Corvettes for the Money 2024. In 5th place, I've got the C7 LT1. It finished first in performance, but due to its high price tag, it's in 5th place. The LS1 powered C5s finish a solid 4th. And in 3rd, I've got the C6 LS2 powered cars. In 2nd place, coming in with its lightweight, light price, and high-end performance, is the C5 Z06. And the winner of the Toys for Life Best Corvette for the Money in 2024 goes to the LS3 powered C6 Corvettes. Now, if you happen to be actually buying a Corvette this year, first of all, congratulations, you won't be disappointed. If you happen to have a strong aesthetic preference for one of the models or generations that we discussed, then by all means factor that into your equation, because it's absolutely a big part of the experience. And it goes without saying, definitely try to drive each one of these generations, because there might be other subjective things that you absolutely hate about a certain car or you love about a certain car, and that needs to be part of your equation as well. And most importantly of all, guys, have fun with this process. Be sure to choose wisely. Definitely hit that thumbs up below. And most of all, thanks for watching.